cap space ahead of free agency next week. So, Kevin, you like all the moves that the Bears have been making, and along those lines, what else should they be doing?
Yeah, Drew Dalman's retirement is a big hit, okay?
Yeah.
But as far as what Ryan Poles can control, it's A++ that last week. To take advantage of a desperate team in Buffalo and get that kind of return for DJ Moore is really cool. And now they've got a lot of money to play with. Obviously, they're going to need pass rush. I want to see a big swing with the assets that they have with the cap space. Maybe you're in the Max Crosby sweepstakes now. Maybe you're in Trey Hendrickson territory because you've got that kind of money. So I think that you're talking about Ben Johnson, year 2, Caleb Williams, year 3. They're going to have the roster ready to compete for an NFC championship because of what Ryan Poles is doing this week.
Listen, Kevin and I are kind of sharing a brain on the show.
There we
today.
go.
I mean, the trade makes a ton of sense. I mean, look, when you look at DJ Moore, he basically, was, I think staring at a diminishing role, in Chicago. When you look at the young receivers that they have, and maybe you throw in Colston Loveland, the pass catchers, I guess you could say, that they have in Chicago, that, they really didn't need him. They had younger, more productive, less expensive options. And so to trade him and get a second-round pick for him is pretty good because you got Rome Odunze, you got Luther Burden, you got Loveland. And so you have all that. Now, I do think the investment turns to the defensive side of the ball. So certainly, like everybody else in the NFL, they're going to be linked to Max Crosby. But Hendrickson, also another guy that I think that when you talk about the impact that he could have, other than last year where he was kind of banged up and had a bad year, look at like the previous 7 years. Like he has been as good as any edge player the NFL has seen over that stretch. And, you might be able to get him at a much reduced rate because of his age and the year he's coming off of. So I think Chicago finds himself in a pretty good situation.
Yeah, these conversations continue to absolutely fascinate me because I made a whole video already talking about, and I actually made a couple other videos for other teams where I kept referencing the Dallas Cowboys or where I kept referencing the Chicago Bears and Max Crosby, and how if you add a Max Crosby, like I think you're a Crosby away. They're one of the few teams that, like, you can add a Crosby, and it's like, yeah, that could be the difference between winning a Super Bowl and not. But what still is interesting, if you can get trade at a discount and you don't give up your trade capital for Max Crosby, you're in this situation to really, truly set yourself up for like a 5-year window. Now, I'm not a huge fan of trying to automate to try to create this big, broad window. Like people always do that, and I'm always like, you got to look at things on like a 3-year window, 2-year window. If you have a chance to win a Super Bowl, you go all in now. Don't be like, well, we don't want to our future this that. It's like you have no idea. You have no idea. And so if there's an opportunity to get after it now, get after it now. That is what you do. That is what you do. And I'm a firm believer in that. But the Bears are still in a very fascinating situation here, and I made the video before we were talking about, like, the whole idea of trading draft, of getting rid of draft capital and paying for a player now, and then when you have to pay for Caleb Williams, you wish you kind of had those draft picks. Like it's a a delicate dance, so to speak. But if you now go in free agency and pay for some of these defensive players, or a big massive piece that you could have, I mean, you got Trey Hendrickson and Jalen Phillips. I would be more inclined to spend that money there and keep my draft picks. Because if you now use those draft picks wisely, you actually can legitimately set yourself up for a pretty large Super Bowl window in a way where it's one thing if these guys weren't available. Okay. And then it was like, hey man, if we want to take this big swing, we can. And it's on Max Crosby. Let's go. That's totally fair, because then it's like, win the Super Bowl, right? Try to win the Super Bowl now. But there is still another strategic move where you set yourself up for like potentially the next 3, 4, 5 years, which very much, because I kept saying the Bears can become the Chiefs. The Bears can become the Chiefs. The Bears could become the Chiefs. It's very much Chiefs 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, right? Like, that's how you get there. That's how you get there. if you make if you make moves like this where you trade draft capital and pay for everyone now and yada yada yada, you're more at the mercy now of essentially a more balanced version of the Chiefs from like 23 onward, which is still good, which is still legit, which is still great, but not quite what we saw in 2018, 19, 20, 21, etc. And so that's kind of what I've just been marinating on, because again, I feel obligated to keep saying this in all my Max Crosby adjacent videos, like every single team is better with Max Crosby, every single team, but there are other more potentially interesting moves to make. And although I do think the Bears are arguably, and I'd have to think about it a little bit more out of all the other teams that people are talking about Max Crosby going, I do think that he has the greatest impact, and the fact that the Bears can do it without sacrificing too much. Granted, everyone's still giving up arguably the same, you know, you're paying him the same amount of money and you're giving up the same relative draft capital. I do think that technically affects the Bears the least when comparing it to, say, the Cowboys, the Ravens, and, you know, any other team. And so that's all fair and well and good. And I think it gives the Bears an immediate impact in a way that it wouldn't necessarily as much as the Ravens, the Cowboys, etc. But I do think that there is still another path that leads the Bears to an actual fortified. Like we got 5-6 years. Like we got the freedom, we got the flexibility. Like we are good, man. Like we are not going anywhere. And so many teams have said that and felt that, and it hasn't panned out. But when you look at what the Bears have, when you look at who they're paying, who they're not, and even when they find themselves in a situation where it's like, okay, we got to start paying these guys, you have enough, and now you also have the ability, not unlike what the Chiefs did, where it's like, hey, we're kind of almost what you did here with DJ Moore as well, obviously. Although ideally, you'd be potentially giving up on even better pieces, and you've already won and got the fruits of them. Why my mind goes to more with the Chiefs, where whether it be Trent or Tyreek or, you know, whichever time we want to use, where you're kind of like, no, we're good in this situation, and now we can get in return as well, right? We can get now more draft capital work to kind of keep this party going, and then it's just kind of, you know, lather, rinse, repeat. So I'm just trying to honestly have these conversations in a slightly different angle, because everyone is. So every time you hear a big free agent name, everyone is just automatically like, yeah, get him, get him, get him, get him, get him, get him, get him. And it's just kind of like, well, there's actually some other interesting paths to explore. There's still other interesting conversations to be had in this realm, and not the automatic, we have the draft capital, we can win a Super Bowl, you go for it now. And it's like, yeah, but there are other intriguing options too that are really worth discussing. Really worth discussing. But at the end of the day, if I look at two teams that are two completely unrelated and different positions, the Chargers potentially adding like an A.J. Brown or a legit bona fide wide receiver, one big body, or the Bears adding a dude on defense, obviously a Max Crosby, etc. I do think it's got the potential to be the biggest impact, the biggest acquisition that has the most prominent. We see it game after game after game of like, yep, like glad I got that guy. And that does go a long way. That does go a long way. Okay, but the last thing I'll say about the Bears is that, you know, we talked about Drew Dolman before, and the O-line, make no mistake about it, this O-line was a superpower for the Bears last year. And so potentially compromising that is a legitimate thing that you have to figure out. And at this stage, and that's why also the draft capital is important to me. That's why I'm very much like still of the line of like, I believe in Ben Johnson so much. And if you believe that Caleb Williams is going to continue to grow and evolve and get better and better, you do have the potential to make this one of the most insane offenses we've ever seen in the history of the NFL. And I don't want to compromise that. I don't want to compromise that. And of course, I want a great defense, of course. And some teams, I'm kind of like, you definitely want to have a great defense. And sometimes it's like, as long as the defense isn't a liability, that's all you need. That's all you need. And so I look at the Bears as coming from that, where it's like, as long as the defense isn't a liability, and as long as Caleb Williams continues to evolve and grow, it's just like this offense should legitimately just take care of the rest. And then so do you need to allocate all this money and resources, draft capital, etc., on defense when you just want to make sure that you can handle any punch that your offense might take, whether it's losing an offensive lineman, whatever it may be, because that is going to be one of the most powerful punches that you can throw, that as long as your defense isn't giving up 45 points a game, you're good. So, yeah, just where my mind's at right now. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think? I almost said the New York Giants. I don't know where that came from. The Chicago Bears. Let me know your thoughts. I read every single comment. So, you agree with me or disagree with me? Either way, let's get some discussions. Let's get some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all legitimately feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much.